Lloyd Smith, moving on. Moving on, Lloyd Smith.
When we were being seated, the woman at the next table was already talking to the man sitting across from her. If he thinks we've forgotten what he's done, he's wrong. Do you hear me? Wrong. And don't let him pretend that just because his brother forgave him 20 years ago, we have too. We have not. And we never will. She kept that up through our salads, through our entrees, even through our blueberry pie. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests, I couldn't help but think of the words written by the great Persian poet Omar Khayyam nearly 1,000 years ago. Don't let your life become an episode on the Dr. Phil show. Actually, that's what Khayyam would have said had the Persians been afflicted with Dr. Phil. He really wrote, "The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. Time only flows in one direction. We can't unthink our thoughts, unsay our words, or undo our actions. What's written is written. What's done is done." I think we all know that, don't we? But why do we have such trouble living like we know it? My 50th high school class reunion is coming up later this summer. And that's made me think a lot about my teenage years. When I do, I always think about the petty dishonesties I lived and the discomfort they caused my parents. And I recall the minor indignities that we repeatedly inflicted on each other in school. When I was 16, I decided that I was a beatnik, or at least the kind of beatnik who could live within about 4 miles of this spot with conservative Republican parents. Not a simple task. Like my fellow sadly misunderstood beatniks, I was an anguished poet. I won't read you any of my anguished poetry right now, though, because you've just finished dinner. I knew that all the anguished beatnik poets smoked because I had carefully studied their pictures in my mom's Life magazine. So I started smoking. My mom had mom radar, and she knew I was smoking the moment I lit that first cigarette. But the first time she asked me directly, I lied directly. I lied every other time she asked me to. I even lied after I quit smoking. Now, if that seems like a small thing to you, that's because it really was a small thing. And that's the point. As we live the days and weeks and months and years and decades of our lives, the minor dishonesties accumulate. Every time I lied to my mom, the burden that I was carrying with me through my life got just a tiny bit heavier. I wasn't any worse than the average teenager. I know that because a few years later, the universe laughed in my face and made me a high school teacher. That gave me 1/3 of a century to experience the arrows from the target's point of view. One day, when I was muttering with anger as a smirking student walked away from my desk after making a snide remark, another student who was standing there leaned over and said, "Mr. Smith, you're in a marathon. You're never going to finish if you get mad every time you step in some dog crap on the road." Now there's a poetic image for you. But he was exactly right. As you make your way through life, you can't keep picking up new burdens to carry. Carrying them wastes your energy. It consumes your time. It depletes your spirit. As the moving finger wrote the story of my adult years as a teacher, I came to realize that the remarks most of the kids made were so faint that they were weightless, and those pages fluttered away in the breeze. As the moving finger wrote down the lies that I was telling my mom, she reached out and took those pages to carry for herself. After all, she was my mom. And that woman in the restaurant, for 20 years, The moving finger has been recording her anger and resentment in heavy, dark print. If she can't put those pages down, they will crush her and her family. The moving finger has already written all of the stories of our lives to this point, and it has moved on. Will you be moving with it? Or will you pretend that you can move backward in time in order to unthink your thoughts or unsay your words or undo your actions? Will you be cringing in shame and embarrassment every time you remember all of the silly things you've said and the foolish things you've done? Will we see you cowering on Dr. Phil's couch while he peels your life like an onion and makes you think about the mess you've made of everything? Or will you do the hardest thing of all? Lay your burdens down and move on. What's written is written. What's done is done. And Madam Toastmaster, so am I.